They wore black to my wedding. Not navy, not charcoal. Black. Like they were attending a funeral. My mother told guests she was mourning my mistake. My father shook hands like he was offering condolences. By the time my husband stood up and said, "Since we're being honest tonight," half the room thought my marriage was already doomed. Then he hit play, and the people who came dressed for a funeral realized it wasn't mine, it was theirs. Before I tell you what was on that recording, tell me something. Have you ever had someone smile at you in public while quietly trying to destroy you? Comment. I see it now if you've lived that kind of betrayal. If you think I should have stayed silent to keep the peace, you might change your mind in the next few minutes. The first time I felt it shift was over lemon chicken and crystal wine glasses. My parents insisted on hosting the engagement dinner at their house, the one with the manicured hedges and the foyer chandelier my mother liked to describe as understated elegance. Daniel squeezed my hand before we walked in. I remember thinking how steady he felt compared to the tightness in my chest. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. My mother air-kissed me before holding me at arm's length, scanning my dress like I was a display item she hadn't approved. "Oh, sweetheart," she said lightly, "you look relaxed." Relaxed? The word landed with a strange weight. Daniel charmed everyone effortlessly. My aunt laughed at his story about working cybersecurity for small businesses. My father nodded politely, asking about market trends, speaking to him like a potential acquisition. But halfway through dinner, my mother set down her wine glass and smiled in that careful way she does when she's about to say something harmless. "So, Daniel," she began, her voice smooth, "have you two discussed financial planning? You know, protection." I felt my spine straighten. Daniel didn't flinch. "We've talked about long-term goals." "Yes." My father cleared his throat. "A prenup isn't romantic, but neither is divorce." A fork clinked somewhere down the table. I laughed too quickly. "Dad, we just got engaged." "I'm only thinking ahead," he replied calmly. "Love is emotional. Assets are practical." There it was, that sentence. Clean. Clinical. I noticed Lydia glance down at her phone, avoiding my eyes. Daniel's thumb brushed the inside of my wrist, grounding me. "We're building something together," he said evenly, "not negotiating an exit." My mother tilted her head. "Of course. We just want to ensure Hannah's security." Security. I had built my career on helping people untangle emotional manipulation, yet sitting at that polished mahogany table, I felt 14 again, eager to prove I wasn't making a mistake. After dessert, I went into the kitchen to breathe. The dishwasher hummed softly. I pressed my palms against the cool granite countertop. That's when I heard it. My mother's voice floated in from the dining room, lower now. "Love fades," she said quietly. "Assets don't." My father murmured something I couldn't fully catch, something about timing. I stepped back into the hallway just as Lydia turned the corner. She startled when she saw me. "Oh," she said quickly. "Mom didn't mean anything. I hadn't told her I heard anything." Daniel found me a minute later. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. He studied my face a second longer than usual. We said goodnight under the porch lights. My parents hugged me stiffly. My mother whispered, "We'll talk soon. Not about wedding plans. Just, we'll talk." As Daniel drove us home, the silence between us felt different. Not heavy. Alert. I stared out the window, replaying that sentence. Love fades. Assets don't. That was the first time I realized my engagement might not be a celebration to them. It might be a negotiation. And I had no idea how far they were willing to go to win. The brunch invitation came 3 days later. "Just immediate family," my mother had texted. "We need clarity." Clarity. Daniel offered to skip it. I insisted we go. "They just need reassurance," I told him. I said it like I believed it. My parents' country club dining room smelled like coffee and polished wood. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating white linen tables. It felt sterile, like we were about to sign paperwork instead of share pancakes. My father wasted no time. "So," he said, stirring his coffee slowly, "Daniel, tell me about your long-term plans." Daniel smiled. "With Hannah? With your career?" My father clarified. "Growth trajectory. Stability." I forced a light laugh. "Dad, he has a stable job." "I'm asking him," my father replied, not looking at me. Daniel folded his hands calmly. "I run cybersecurity audits for mid-sized firms. Demand is increasing. I'm not concerned." My mother leaned forward. "And what about debt?" The word dropped like a fork on tile. Daniel didn't blink. "None." She arched a brow. "Student loans? Investments? Risk exposure?" I felt heat creeping up my neck. "Mom." She lifted her hands. "I'm only protecting you, sweetheart." That sentence again. Protection disguised as interrogation. Lydia sipped her mimosa quietly. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Then my father said it. "We've heard things." The air shifted. "Heard what?" I asked. "That Daniel has expressed interest in your inheritance timeline?" I laughed, but it sounded wrong even to me. "What timeline?" My father glanced at my mother. "You mentioned it at dinner," she said smoothly. "When you stepped into the kitchen." I hadn't. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's not accurate," he said evenly. My mother shrugged lightly. Perhaps someone misunderstood. Someone. I felt something click into place. The rumor didn't start by accident. The rest of brunch blurred into small talk and tight smiles. But as we stood to leave, Lydia grabbed my arm. "I just think you should be careful," she whispered. "People change when money's involved." "People like who?" I asked. She hesitated. "You don't see everything, Hannah." I stared at her. "See what?" She didn't answer. She walked back toward the table. In the parking lot, Daniel exhaled slowly. "They're planting something," he said. "No," I replied automatically. "They're just anxious." He studied me carefully. "Do you actually believe that?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A message from Maya. "Hey." Random question. "Did Daniel sign a prenup yet?" My chest tightened. "Why?" I typed back. Her response came seconds later. "Your mom mentioned at book club that she's worried he might be strategic." Strategic. The word felt clinical, calculated. I looked up at my parents through the country club window. They were laughing with another couple. Normal, polished, untouchable. Daniel followed my gaze. "What is it?" I swallowed. "They're talking," I said quietly, "and not to us." That was the moment I understood this wasn't concern. It was a narrative. And it was already moving without my permission. 2 weeks later, my parents hosted another dinner. This one was casual. Which, in my mother's language, meant fewer flowers but sharper intentions. Daniel couldn't make it an emergency client call. My mother had sounded almost pleased when I told her. "Oh," she said lightly. "That's unfortunate timing." I arrived alone. The house smelled like rosemary and lemon polish. Soft jazz drifted through the living room. Everything curated, everything composed. I played my role, smiled, passed wine, answered questions about venues and floral arrangements. But I noticed something different. When Daniel's name came up, the energy shifted. My aunt asked, "Is he still consulting? Or has he secured something more permanent?" "Still." My cousin chimed in. "I just worry about long-term compatibility." Long-term, the same language, the same rhythm. It wasn't concern, it was coordination. After dinner, I stepped into the kitchen to refill my water. The dishwasher hummed. Ice clinked softly in a glass. Then I heard my father's voice from the hallway. She doesn't know the terms yet. My pulse skipped. My mother answered. Lower, sharper than usual. She doesn't need to. Not until after the wedding. I froze. What if he pushes? My father asked. He won't, she said confidently. If we position it correctly. Position it. I edged closer to the doorway, heart hammering. The trust activates in stages, my father continued. If she marries without a prenup, the board will question it. The board won't question me, my mother snapped quietly. But if he thinks access is delayed, he'll show his true colors. There it was. Access. They weren't protecting me from Daniel. They were testing him. I felt like the air had been sucked from the house. My mother's heels clicked toward the kitchen. I stepped back just in time, pretending to scroll through my phone. She stopped when she saw me. Her smile came instantly smooth, polished. Sweetheart, she said. Are you all right? I studied her face. Not a flicker of guilt. I heard my name, I replied evenly. She laughed softly. Of course you did. We were discussing seating arrangements. My father appeared behind her, expression unreadable. Big decisions ahead, he said calmly. I realized then how carefully they were crafting this. Not loud accusations, not dramatic ultimatums, whispers, suggestions, strategic concern. Do you trust him? My mother asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. Yes, I said. She tilted her head. Completely? The implication lingered. I wanted to say yes without hesitation. I did trust him. But now I understood something deeper. They weren't trying to stop the wedding outright. They were building doubt. Layer by layer. Narrative by narrative. And if Daniel reacted emotionally to pressure, they'd use it as proof. I felt something shift inside me, not fear. Awareness. For the first time, I wasn't trying to defend them. I was trying to understand them. And what I understood scared me more than any rumor. This wasn't panic. It was strategy. And if they were positioning the board, that meant this was bigger than family dinner. The bridal boutique smelled like champagne and tulle. Maya zipped me into the sample dress while 3 mirrors reflected a version of me I barely recognized, glowing, hopeful, steady. This is it, she said softly. You look calm? I am calm, I replied automatically. The lie tasted metallic. My phone buzzed on the velvet bench. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. Maya picked it up before I could stop her. Her smile shifted slightly. What? I asked. She hesitated. It's just weird. My stomach tightened. What is? She handed me the phone. A group text from my extended family. My cousin Jenna had written, "Is it true Daniel asked about the trust payout schedule?" My heart slammed against my ribs. Below it, my aunt had responded. Elaine said he seemed very interested in long-term access. Access. The same word. I felt the room tilt slightly. That's not true, I whispered. Maya's brows furrowed. Where would that even come from? My mother, I said before I could stop myself. Silence filled the boutique fitting room. Outside, I could hear another bride laughing, the soft pop of a champagne cork. Inside, my reflection looked suddenly fragile. I thought it was just subtle comments, I said. At dinner. At brunch. Maya crossed her arms. This isn't subtle. I typed quickly. That's false. Daniel has never asked about any payout schedule. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, my aunt replied, "Oh, honey, we're just making sure you're protected." Protected. The same choreography, different stage. I looked down at the dress pulled around my feet. White. Hopeful. Exposed. Another message came through. From Lydia. Maybe just clarify things with Mom privately. She's just worried. Just worried. I stared at the word just. Just worried. Just asking. Just protecting. Always just. Are you okay? Maya asked gently. I swallowed hard. They're building something, I said slowly, and I don't even know how big it is. She squeezed my hand. Have you told Daniel? No. Why not? Because part of me still wanted this to be misunderstanding, because if I said it out loud, it would become intentional. I walked out to the mirror again. The dress was beautiful. Soft lace along the neckline, delicate sleeves. I imagined walking down the aisle, but now I imagined whispers following me. Strategic, access, protected. My phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. Just so you know, some people are questioning his motives. No name, no explanation, just confirmation. I felt something inside me finally settle. Not fear, not panic, clarity. This wasn't family anxiety. This was reputation sabotage, and it had already left the house. Daniel met me outside the boutique with coffee and his steady smile. He kissed my forehead. How was it? Beautiful, I said. True. Complicated, I added. Also true. We sat on a bench overlooking the street. Chicago wind moved softly through the trees. For a moment, everything felt normal again. Then I told him. About the group text. About the anonymous message. About the word access. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look surprised either. When I finished, he took a slow breath. I was wondering when you'd hear. The world narrowed. When I'd hear what? He stared ahead at the traffic lights instead of at me. Your dad called me last week. The air shifted. He said he wanted to talk man to man. My throat tightened. And you didn't tell me? I didn't want to escalate it, he said quietly. What did he say? Daniel's jaw flexed slightly. He asked about my long-term financial goals, about whether I believed in leveraging marital partnerships. My stomach turned. And then? He said he'd seen marriages crumble over mismatched expectations. Daniel paused. He suggested signing something preemptively might prevent misunderstandings. A prenup? Not exactly. Daniel's voice lowered, more like a behavioral clause tied to trust disbursements. I stared at him. What does that even mean? It means, he said evenly, he implied your trust activates in phases, and that my access to shared assets could be delayed. Shared assets. Like I was a vault. And if you refused? I whispered. Daniel finally looked at me. He said resistance often reveals motive. The sentence hit like a physical blow. I felt humiliation bloom under my skin, not because Daniel might be suspected, but because my father had tested him like an applicant. You didn't argue? I asked. No. Why not? Because that's what he wanted. Silence settled between us. He was probing for reaction, Daniel continued. If I got defensive, it would confirm his narrative. And what narrative is that? That I'm strategic. The same word. Strategic. I wrapped my arms around myself. They're making you look like a threat. Daniel's voice remained steady. They're making me look like a risk. The difference was subtle. Dangerous. Why didn't you tell me? I asked again, softer this time, because I wanted to see how far they'd go. That sentence made my chest tighten. How far? I repeated. He hesitated, then said quietly, farther than this. My phone buzzed again. Another text from my aunt. We're all just concerned about your future, sweetheart. Concern? Protection? Security? Every word sharpened into a blade. Daniel reached for my hand. There's something else, he said carefully. My breath caught. What? He held my gaze this time. I didn't just listen during that call. My pulse stilled. What do you mean? He exhaled slowly. I recorded it. The morning of my wedding smelled like roses and hairspray. Soft light poured into the bridal suite through tall arched windows. Maya adjusted my veil while a makeup artist dusted highlighter across my cheekbones. Laughter filled the room light, nervous, hopeful. For a few hours, everything felt untouched. Daniel had texted earlier, "No matter what happens today, I'm here." I tried not to read too much into that. My phone buzzed again. "Lydia, they're on their way." I smiled at the message automatically. They meant my parents. I told myself today would reset everything. Weddings do that, right? They soften tension. They remind people what matters. I stood in front of the mirror once more. White silk, lace sleeves, calm breath. The venue overlooked Lake Michigan. Rows of ivory chairs faced a simple floral arch. Sunlight glinted off the water like scattered glass. Guests began arriving in soft pastels and muted blues. Then the energy shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was visual. My parents stepped out of their car dressed in black. Not navy, not charcoal. Black. My mother wore a fitted black dress with pearl earrings. My father's suit was tailored, crisp, unmistakably dark. For a split second, I thought maybe it was coincidence. Then I saw my mother's expression. Serene, composed, intentional. Murmurs rippled through the entrance. I felt it from across the courtyard. Maya followed my gaze and went still. "No," she whispered. I stepped forward before I realized I was moving. "Mom?" I asked when they approached. She kissed my cheek gently. "You look beautiful," she said warmly. "Why are you wearing black?" She blinked softly like the question surprised her. "It's elegant," she replied. My father adjusted his cufflinks. "Timeless," he added. Behind them, I caught snippets of whispers. "Is that symbolic? Are they protesting? Did something happen?" My chest tightened. "This isn't funny," I said quietly. My mother lowered her voice just enough. "We're simply honoring how serious marriage is." The sentence slid under my skin. My father leaned closer. "You still have time," he murmured. The world narrowed. "Time for what?" I whispered. "To reconsider." The word hung between us like smoke. Daniel appeared beside me then, steady and calm in his gray suit. He didn't look at my parents. He looked at me. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded automatically. My mother's eyes flicked between us. Guests continued arriving. The black stood out like a shadow against white chairs. A visual contradiction. A message. Daniel's hand found mine. "I need a minute before the ceremony," he said quietly. "For what?" I asked. He met my gaze fully this time. "Trust me." Then he walked toward the DJ booth. And for the first time that morning, I wasn't afraid of what my parents might say. I was afraid of what Daniel might do. The ceremony hadn't started yet, but it already felt like something was ending. Clusters of guests gathered beneath the white canopy. Champagne flutes clinked nervously. I caught fragments of conversation drifting through the air like static. "Is everything okay? Why black?" I heard there were concerns. Concerns. My mother moved through the crowd gracefully, touching elbows, offering tight smiles. "I just believe marriage deserves gravity," she said to one guest. "It's not something to enter lightly." Gravity. To another, she added softly, "We're praying this decision brings clarity." Praying. It was subtle. It was surgical. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't objecting outright. She was planting doubt in real time. My father stood near the bar, nodding solemnly as he spoke to Daniel's college friend. "It's difficult when emotions override practicality," he said calmly. "But we support whatever outcome ensures stability." Outcome? Stability. The words sounded almost kind until you realized what they implied. I walked toward my mother, veil brushing against my shoulders. "Mom," I said quietly, forcing calm into my voice, "please stop." She blinked innocently. "Stop what, sweetheart?" "You know what?" She leaned closer, lowering her tone. "If you're feeling unsure, that's perfectly natural." "I'm not unsure." She studied me carefully. You don't have to perform confidence. Perform? The implication stung. Across the courtyard, Lydia stood awkwardly between two cousins. I approached her. Have you said anything? I asked softly. She looked startled. No. I just answered questions. What questions? She hesitated. About the trust. The word hit again, like a quiet drumbeat. Why is everyone suddenly discussing my trust? I demanded. Lydia glanced toward our parents. They're worried you might not see everything clearly. See clearly. As if love were a fog. The music cue signaled guests to take their seats. Daniel returned from the DJ booth. His expression was calm, too calm. They've been talking, I said quietly. I know, he replied. About the trust. About your motives. He nodded once. Let them. I stared at him. Let them? He held my gaze. For now. The officiant stepped forward. Guests settled into their chairs. The black of my parents' clothing cut sharply against the sea of pale dresses and summer suits. They didn't look like parents attending a celebration. They looked like witnesses waiting for a verdict. As the music swelled, my father leaned toward Daniel one last time. You still have time, he murmured again. Daniel didn't respond. He just squeezed my hand. And when I looked into his eyes, I didn't see anger. I saw calculation. The ceremony began. But I could feel it beneath everything. This wasn't over. And whatever Daniel had prepared, he wasn't planning to stay silent much longer. The ceremony ended in applause. We kissed. People cheered. Cameras flashed. On the surface, it looked perfect. But perfection is easy to fake in photographs. Cocktail hour unfolded under string lights and soft jazz. Servers moved gracefully between clusters of guests. Laughter rose and fell in carefully measured waves. I could feel it, though. The distance. When Daniel stepped away to greet his coworkers, I found myself momentarily alone near the dessert table. Two of my mother's friends stood nearby. She's glowing, one said softly. Yes, the other replied. Let's hope she understands what she's risking. Risking. I turned slightly, pretending not to hear. Then Lydia approached. You okay? She asked, too casually. I'm married, I said. I should be. She shifted uncomfortably. Mom's just trying to prevent something painful. For who? I asked. For you. I let out a quiet laugh. By humiliating us? She's not humiliating you. She's wearing black to my wedding. Lydia glanced at our mother across the lawn. She said it's symbolic. Of what? She didn't say. I studied my sister's face. You believe her, don't you? Her silence answered for her. Across the courtyard, I noticed my father speaking with Daniel's uncle. His posture was composed, controlled, authoritative. The same posture he used during business negotiations. Not weddings. A man from Daniel's side approached me cautiously. Can I ask something? He said gently. I braced myself. Sure. There's been some talk about financial protections. Just making sure Daniel's intentions are clear. Intentions? I smiled politely. My husband's intentions are marriage. He nodded awkwardly and stepped away. Marriage, not merger. I suddenly understood something deeper. My parents weren't trying to stop the ceremony. They were trying to frame the narrative for after. If anything went wrong in the future, they wanted witnesses to remember today as a warning. That realization chilled me. Daniel returned to my side, reading my expression immediately. They're still talking, he said quietly. Yes. Do you trust me? The question steadied me. Yes. He nodded. Good. I glanced toward the DJ booth. He followed my gaze. Soon, he said softly. My pulse quickened. Lydia walked past us then, hesitating just long enough to whisper, I hope you know what you're doing. It wasn't supportive. It wasn't cruel. It was uncertain. And uncertainty spreads faster than rumor. As the sky darkened and reception lights flickered on, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't just defending my marriage. I was defending Daniel's character. And the longer this continued, the more silence would look like guilt. Daniel squeezed my hand once more. Trust me. But this time I could feel the moment approaching. My mother chose the moment carefully. Between cocktail hour and dinner, when the sky was dark enough to soften edges but not conversations. Hannah? She said lightly, touching my elbow. Can we speak privately? My father followed without waiting for permission. They guided me toward a quiet corner near the lake, just beyond the reach of the string lights. I folded my hands to stop them from shaking. What is this about? I asked. My mother sighed as if I'd disappointed her. We're worried, she said. About what? About you. There it was again. I'm married, I said calmly. This is done. My father stepped closer. It doesn't have to be. The sentence sliced clean. I stared at him. Excuse me? You can still protect yourself, he continued. There are documents that could ensure proper structure. Structure. This is my wedding, I whispered. Why are you doing this today? Because today is when you're most emotional, my mother replied softly, and emotional decisions need guidance. I felt something crack inside me. I'm not emotional, I said, voice steady. She tilted her head. You're reacting. That word. Reacting. As if I were irrational. Unstable. My father lowered his voice. The trust board meets quarterly. If this marriage appears unprotected, disbursement phases could be reviewed. The lake wind suddenly felt colder. Reviewed how? I asked. Delayed, he answered. The implications settled between us. Delay the trust. Apply pressure. Wait for Daniel to object. Confirm the narrative. You're testing him, I said quietly. My mother's smile didn't move. We're protecting you. No, I said slowly. You're trying to make him look guilty. My father's jaw tightened. If he resists structure, what does that tell you? That you're creating it, I shot back. Silence fell. For a moment, I saw something in my mother's eyes, not doubt. Calculation. You're upset, she said gently. We'll revisit this when you're calmer. Calmer, as if I were hysterical. I am calm, I replied. She gave me a sympathetic look that felt like a public statement waiting to happen. If you insist on proceeding, my father said evenly, we can't guarantee future flexibility. Future flexibility. They were threatening me on my wedding night. With a smile, I walked away before my composure broke. Daniel met me halfway across the lawn. What happened? He asked quietly. They're leveraging the trust, I said. They're going to delay it if you don't agree to some structure. He nodded once. I figured? You figured? He studied my face carefully. Hannah. His tone shifted. Steady. Certain. Do you want the truth? The question made my heartbeat slow instead of speed up. Yes, I whispered. He held my gaze. Then it's time. We stood near the edge of the lake, far enough from the reception lights that no one could see my face clearly. Daniel pulled his phone from his pocket. Before you hear this, he said quietly, I need you to understand something. What? I didn't record your dad to use against him. Then why? Because the questions didn't feel like concern. They felt like strategy. The word again. He unlocked his phone and handed it to me. Listen. The recording began with faint background noise clinking silverware, the low murmur of a restaurant. My father's voice came through clearly. I'm not accusing you of anything, Daniel. I'm simply observing patterns. Daniel's recorded voice was calm. What patterns? Financial opportunism often disguises itself as romance. My stomach twisted. The recording continued. If Hannah marries without protective structure, my father said, the trust board may need to reconsider phased activation. Phased activation, So you'll delay it? Daniel asked in the recording. A delay reveals motive, my father replied smoothly. If you object strongly, we'll know why. My breath caught. Silence filled the audio for a moment. Then my mother's voice entered the conversation. You seem intelligent, Daniel, she said lightly. Surely you understand legacy management. Legacy? We've seen marriages where affection shifts once assets are accessible, she continued. We'd hate for Hannah to learn that lesson publicly. Publicly. Daniel's recorded voice lowered slightly. Are you suggesting I intend to access her trust? I'm suggesting, my mother said softly, that clarity protects everyone. The recording clicked off. The lake wind moved against my veil. I felt hollow, not shocked, not surprised, just hollow. They were setting you up, I whispered. Daniel nodded. They wanted me defensive, angry, so they could say I was unstable, and if you stayed calm, they escalate publicly. Which they had. I swallowed hard. They're not trying to protect me, I said. No. They're building a story. Yes. Behind us, music swelled faintly from the reception tent. The DJ was testing microphones. People were taking their seats for dinner. Speeches were coming. I looked at Daniel. Is that all? He hesitated. No. He tapped the screen again. There's more. Another clip began shorter. My mother's voice, clearer this time. If we create doubt in front of witnesses, she'll question him herself. The air left my lungs. She trusts perception more than confrontation, my mother continued. If enough people express concern, she'll hesitate. The recording ended. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. My wedding dress rustled in the wind. They've been planning this, I said slowly. Yes. Before today. Yes. The music inside shifted into the opening notes of the reception entrance. They're about to give speeches, Daniel said quietly. I looked toward the glowing tent. I don't want my wedding to become a courtroom. It doesn't have to. But if we stay silent, they win, he finished. I closed my eyes briefly. I had spent my life preserving harmony, smoothing edges, avoiding confrontation. But tonight, harmony was being weaponized. I opened my eyes. What happens if we play it? I asked. Daniel met my gaze. Everything changes. The reception doors opened. Our names were announced. And I had seconds to decide whether to protect peace or protect truth. The doors opened. Our names echoed through the reception tent. Applause rose. Music swelled. Daniel and I walked in smiling hands linked, posture steady, performance flawless. If anyone looked closely, they would have seen the shift in my eyes. Dinner began under warm golden lights. Crystal glasses shimmered. Laughter returned in cautious waves. For a moment, I convinced myself we didn't have to do it. We could let the night end beautifully. We could deal with my parents later privately, surgically, quietly. Harmony over humiliation. Daniel leaned toward me. What do you want? He asked softly. I want this to be about us, I said. It still can be. The MC tapped the microphone. Let's begin with a few words from the bride's father. Of course. My father rose slowly. Black suit, controlled smile. He adjusted the microphone. I've watched Hannah grow into an intelligent, compassionate woman, he began. Applause. She has always trusted deeply. My stomach tightened. And trust, he continued, is a beautiful thing. A pause. But trust without structure can be risky. The words sliced cleanly through the room. I felt heads subtly turn. My father smiled gently. Marriage isn't just love, it's stewardship, it's responsibility. Stewardship. Responsibility. Those who enter it must be prepared to protect not just emotion, but legacy. Legacy. My mother nodded from her seat. I pray, he continued softly, that wisdom guides every decision made from this day forward. It sounded like blessing. It was a warning. A few guests clapped hesitantly. My chest burned. He wasn't accusing Daniel directly. He was creating plausible deniability, a narrative that could be replayed later as concern. My father raised his glass. To clarity. The word hung in the air like a coded message. I realized something then. If we stayed silent now, this speech would become history. People would remember tonight as the evening my father gently cautioned against risk. They would not remember the manipulation behind it. Daniel's hand tightened slightly in mine. "Still want peace?" he asked quietly. My heart pounded. "I don't want a spectacle. This doesn't have to be one." I looked around the room. My mother's charity board colleagues, my father's business associates, family friends, witnesses. They had come dressed for celebration. My parents had come dressed for narrative control. The MC stepped forward again. Now, a few words from the groom. Daniel stood slowly, calm, measured. He took the microphone. "Thank you," he said. He glanced briefly toward the DJ booth, then back at the crowd. "I appreciate concern," he began. My pulse spiked. He turned toward my father. "And I believe in clarity too." The room grew quieter. Daniel's eyes met mine for half a second. That was the moment I knew the choice had already been made. And whatever happened next, it wouldn't be quiet. Daniel adjusted the microphone slightly. He didn't rush. He didn't smile too broadly. He simply stood there steady, grounded. "I appreciate Mr. Whitmore's words," he began calmly. "Marriage does require clarity." A few polite nods moved through the crowd. "And I agree," he continued. "Trust is beautiful." He paused. "But trust also requires accuracy." The shift was subtle but immediate. My father's posture stiffened. Daniel looked around the room slowly. "I've heard there have been concerns." The word landed carefully. Questions about my intentions. No one spoke, but I could feel it, everyone leaning inward. "I understand why that might happen," Daniel said evenly. "When people love someone deeply, they want to protect them." My mother relaxed slightly. "That was the bait," Daniel continued. "But protection without facts can become something else." The silence thickened. "Over the past few weeks," he said, "there have been conversations about financial structure, about phased trust access, about motive." Murmurs rippled across tables. I saw my aunt glance at my mother. Daniel's tone never wavered. "I want to be very clear tonight." He looked directly at my father. "I have never asked about Hannah's trust payout schedule. There it was. Direct, simple, undeniable. And I have never tied my commitment to asset activation." My father rose slightly in his seat. "Daniel," he began calmly, "this isn't necessary." Daniel held up a gentle hand. "I agree. It shouldn't be necessary." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. "But when narratives circulate," he continued, "clarity becomes essential." My heart pounded so loudly I was sure the microphone would pick it up. Daniel took a breath. Earlier tonight, clarity was mentioned as a value. He glanced at my father again. "I believe in clarity too." The words mirrored perfectly. Strategic. "And because I respect this room, these witnesses, I believe transparency is the most respectful path forward." Witnesses. That word changed everything. My mother's smile tightened. "Hannah," she said softly from her table, "this is inappropriate." Daniel didn't look at her. "I agree that marriage is serious," he said. "So is reputation." A chair scraped against the floor. My father stood. "This isn't the time," he said quietly but firmly. Daniel turned slightly toward the DJ booth. "I disagree." The DJ froze mid-step. Daniel's thumb brushed his phone. "I was taught that clarity removes doubt." My pulse felt electric. "So tonight," he said, voice steady, "let's remove it." He looked at me. not asking. Confirming. I nodded once. Daniel turned back toward the DJ. Since we're sharing clarity, the room felt suspended in glass, and since transparency was requested, my mother's chair pushed back sharply. What are you doing? She demanded. Daniel met her gaze. Honoring your value. He looked at the DJ. Hit play. The music cut mid-note. For half a second, the reception tent existed in complete silence. Then my father's recorded voice filled the speakers. I'm not accusing you, Daniel. I'm observing patterns. Gasps rippled like a wave across the tables. My father's real-life face went completely still. The recording continued. If Hannah marries without protective structure, the trust board may reconsider phased activation. The word activation echoed across crystal glasses and linen. My mother rose halfway from her seat. This is private, she said sharply. No one moved. Daniel didn't touch the microphone. He didn't need to. My recorded voice wasn't present. Only theirs. A delay reveals motive. My father's voice played clearly. If you object strongly, we'll know why. A murmur moved through the room. Heads turned. Eyes shifted. I watched my father calculate in real time. He wasn't angry. He was assessing damage. The audio shifted slightly, background clinking from that dinner weeks ago. My mother's voice entered. If we create doubt in front of witnesses, she'll question him herself. The words landed like glass breaking. A collective inhale filled the tent. My mother's composure cracked for the first time. That's taken out of context, she said quickly. No one responded. The recording continued. She trusts perception more than confrontation, my mother's voice said calmly. If enough people express concern, she'll hesitate. Hesitate. The exact strategy unfolding tonight. Someone near the front table whispered, "Oh my God." My aunt covered her mouth. Lydia looked like she'd been physically struck. The recording ended. Silence. Not awkward silence, not polite silence. Heavy, undeniable silence. The kind that changes relationships permanently. My father stood slowly. This is manipulation, he said evenly, a distorted excerpt. Daniel finally spoke. Would you like me to play the full conversation? The room shifted again. That was the moment. Not when the recording played. Not when the words echoed. But when my father hesitated. Because if there were nothing to hide, he would have said yes immediately. Instead, he adjusted his cuff. This isn't appropriate, he said. My mother's voice rose slightly. Hannah, this is humiliating. Humiliating. I almost laughed. Humiliation had been the plan all along, just not for them. I stepped closer to Daniel. My voice didn't shake. Was it inappropriate when you told him you'd delay my trust to test him? My father's jaw tightened. This conversation is over. The DJ looked frozen. Guests looked stunned. The illusion of gentle concern had shattered in under 30 seconds. But Daniel wasn't finished. He lifted his phone slightly. There's more, he said calmly. My mother's face drained of color. What else did you record? She demanded. Daniel looked at me, not asking permission, confirming alignment. The room held its breath. He nodded once toward the DJ again. Play the next clip. The DJ hesitated for only a second, then the next audio clip filled the tent. My father's voice again calm, controlled. If the board senses instability, they'll authorize a temporary hold. A sharp inhale came from somewhere near the back. Temporary hold. My mother responded in the recording. It's not punishment, it's leverage. Leverage. The word echoed harder than any accusation. In situations like this, my father continued on the recording, pressure clarifies loyalty. Pressure clarifies loyalty. The room seemed to shrink. My father stepped forward abruptly. That was a strategic conversation, he said firmly, taken completely out of context. But context was already filling itself in. Daniel remained composed. "Would you like the rest?" he asked. No one laughed. No one defended them. The illusion had cracked. The recording resumed. "If she feels enough concern from respected voices," my mother's voice said coolly, "she'll think it's her idea." My stomach dropped. Think it's her idea. I watched several of my mother's charity board colleagues exchange looks. One of them, Mrs. Callahan, slowly lowered her glass. The audio continued. "We don't oppose the marriage," my father's recorded voice clarified. "We simply ensure structure protects legacy. Legacy again." Only now it sounded less noble, more calculated. The recording ended. Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. Lydia stood up first. "You said you were protecting her?" she said quietly to our parents. "That doesn't sound like protection." My mother turned sharply. "Lydia, sit down." But her voice no longer carried authority. It carried urgency. I stepped forward before I could second-guess myself. "You were going to delay my trust," I said clearly. "On my wedding." "That's not what my father began." "You said leverage," I cut in. He stopped. Guests were no longer whispering. They were watching, evaluating. My father looked around the room. For the first time that night, he looked smaller. Mrs. Callahan spoke up calmly. "Robert," she said, as someone who sits on that board, "I don't recall discussing weaponizing phase disbursements." Weaponizing. The word landed harder than leverage. My father's composure fractured for half a second. "It was hypothetical," he said tightly. My mother attempted a softer tone. "Hannah, this is becoming theatrical." The irony almost made me smile. Daniel stepped closer beside me. "Transparency tends to feel theatrical when it's unexpected," he said evenly. A ripple of uncomfortable agreement moved through the room. I realized something powerful then. The recording hadn't just exposed manipulation, it had removed ambiguity. There was no longer space for interpretation, only reaction. My father adjusted his jacket slowly. "This conversation is inappropriate for a wedding." He tried to reclaim moral high ground, but the ground was gone. Mrs. Callahan didn't sit down. "Robert," she said carefully, "we'll need to discuss this. Discuss this. Not as parents, as professionals." My mother's face drained further. For the first time since she stepped out of that car in black. She looked afraid. And I understood why. Because reputation was the only asset she truly cared about. No one moved. Not at first. The second recording had ended, but the silence it left behind felt louder than the speakers ever had. Lydia was still standing. She looked from my parents to me like she was seeing a fault line split open in real time. "You told me this was about protecting her," she said quietly. "That you were just being cautious." My mother's composure held but barely. "It was," she replied. "You're misinterpreting strategy as malice." Strategy. The word sounded colder now. Lydia shook her head. "You said if enough people expressed concern, she'd question him herself." A few guests shifted in their seats. No one defended my parents. That was the real collapse. Not shouting. Not chaos. Absence of support. My father stepped forward, adjusting his jacket as if the fabric could restore authority. "This is an emotional overreaction amplified by selective audio," he said evenly. "We were discussing fiduciary responsibility." Mrs. Callahan didn't sit down. "Fiduciary responsibility doesn't involve orchestrating social pressure," she said calmly. Orchestrating. The word landed cleanly. I realized then how many witnesses had just reframed the story in their own minds. My mother tried one last pivot. "Hannah," she said gently, "you don't fully understand how legacy management works." There it was again. The implication that I was naive. For years, that tone would have shrunk me. Tonight, it didn't. "I understand leverage," I said evenly. "I just didn't expect it to be used on me." The room went still again. My father looked around, calculating, searching for alignment. There was none. He reached for my mother's hand. "This conversation is inappropriate," he declared. "We're leaving." It wasn't dramatic. It was strategic retreat. As they turned toward the exit, my father paused. "You've made a mistake," he said quietly, not quite looking at me. For a flicker of a second, the old instinct to soften, to apologize, rose in my throat. Then it dissolved. "No," I said calmly. "I stopped making them tonight." They walked out in black. And for the first time, they weren't controlling the room. They were escaping it. The tent doors swayed slightly after my parents stepped through them. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Not because they didn't know what to say, because they were recalibrating. The air felt different, lighter, but fragile. Like a storm had just passed, and everyone was waiting to see what damage remained. Daniel's hand stayed steady at the small of my back. "You don't have to fix this," he murmured. Fix. That word had defined most of my life. Fix tension. Fix perception. Fix discomfort. I looked around at the faces in the room, friends, colleagues, relatives, who had just witnessed something far bigger than a wedding argument. They had watched control unravel, and I realized silence now would feel like retreat. I stepped toward the microphone again. The soft hum of feedback drew attention back to me. "I didn't expect tonight to look like this," I began. My voice didn't shake. I imagined laughter, toasts, stories about how we met. A few gentle smiles appeared. But I also imagined starting this marriage without doubt hanging in the air. I paused, letting that settle. "I love my family," I continued, "but love isn't leverage, and protection isn't pressure." The words felt simple, clear. For a long time, I confused keeping peace with shrinking myself. Daniel squeezed my hand slightly. "I'm not shrinking anymore." Silence, but this time, supportive. "If anyone leaves tonight remembering anything," I said softly, "I hope it's this. Partnership isn't a negotiation of power. It's a choice to stand beside someone without testing them." A few glasses lifted slightly, not celebratory, affirming. "I chose him," I said, looking at Daniel. "And I choose a life built on trust, not structure designed to trap it." The applause that followed wasn't explosive. It was steady, intentional, grounded. As I stepped back, I felt something inside me settle into place. Not rebellion, alignment. The music resumed, softer now. Conversations slowly returned, not about scandal, but about dinner, about dancing, about moving forward. Daniel leaned close. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes." And for the first time all night, the word carried no defense, only truth. Still, as the evening found its rhythm again, I knew one thing. Tonight had closed one chapter. Tomorrow would open another. And consequences. They never arrive dressed in black. They arrive quietly. The morning light didn't ask questions. It slipped quietly through the curtains, soft and indifferent, as if last night had been nothing more than a loud dream. Daniel was still asleep beside me, one arm resting over my waist. His breathing was steady, grounded, real. My phone was not. It buzzed once, then twice, then relentlessly. I reached for it slowly. Messages, missed calls, notifications stacking faster than I could process. Someone had uploaded a clip of the reception, not the whole confrontation, just enough. My father's voice saying, "A delay reveals motive." My mother's calm tone. If enough people express concern. The comments were brutal. Calculated, manipulative, weaponizing inheritance. The narrative had flipped overnight. Daniel stirred. "Bad?" he asked softly. "Consequential," I replied. An email notification slid across the top of my screen. Subject: Immediate board review. I opened it. Professional language, measured tone. Given last evening's developments, Elaine Whitmore will step aside from leadership pending formal evaluation. Step aside. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse. It was procedural. Daniel read over my shoulder. They care about optics, he said. Yes, I agreed. And optics don't survive recordings. Another vibration. A voicemail from my father. I pressed play. Hannah, his voice began, controlled as ever. This situation has escalated unnecessarily. Public perception can spiral. We need to discuss damage containment. Damage containment. Not apology, not accountability, containment. I deleted it before he finished. Daniel studied my face. You okay? I considered the question carefully. I am, I said, because something inside me felt unshaken. They had built influence through whispers, through suggestion, through curated concern. But last night, clarity had outrun control. And clarity, once heard, doesn't return quietly. For the first time in years, the morning didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. By early afternoon, the storm had changed shape. It wasn't loud anymore. It was strategic. Daniel had stepped out to grab coffee when my phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't my father. It was my mother. Not a voicemail. A direct call. I stared at her name longer than I had that morning. For a second, I considered letting it ring. Then I answered. Silence greeted me first. Controlled silence. You've embarrassed us, she said finally. No hello, no softness. You tried to embarrass my marriage, I replied evenly. A pause. That was a private conversation, she snapped. You made it public the moment you wore black and whispered to guests. Her breath sharpened slightly. You didn't have to play that recording. You didn't have to create it. Silence again. But this time, it felt thinner. You don't understand how reputations work, she said quietly. They're fragile. I almost smiled. Yes, I said. They are. And you've damaged more than you realize. There it was again. The implication of consequence, loss, isolation. For most of my life, that tone would have pulled me back into alignment, made me apologize for the discomfort I caused by resisting. Not today. I didn't damage reputation, I said calmly. I exposed behavior. Her voice dropped. You're choosing him over your family. I'm choosing a partnership without leverage. That's naive. No, I corrected. It's adult. The word hung there. Adult. For the first time in our dynamic, I wasn't seeking approval. I was defining terms. If you walk away like this, she said, quieter now, things won't return to normal. They weren't normal, I replied. Another pause. Longer. Then, we'll see how this plays out, she said. Not reconciliation, not accountability. A strategic retreat. The line went dead. I set the phone down carefully. Daniel returned a few minutes later, studying my expression. That sounded final, he said gently. It was, I replied. Outside the hotel window, the city moved forward as if nothing had shifted. Traffic flowed. People crossed streets. Sunlight reflected off glass buildings. But something fundamental had changed. Not in the headlines, not in the boardrooms. In me. For the first time, I understood something clearly. Breaking a pattern doesn't feel explosive. It feels quiet. Like placing a boundary where a door used to be, and realizing you don't need to stand guard anymore. 3 weeks later, the noise had faded into something quieter, not forgotten, filed, documented, contained. Daniel and I were back in our own kitchen on a Sunday morning, sunlight stretching across the countertops, coffee warming the space between us. The wedding felt distant now, like a turning point rather than an explosion. My phone buzzed once. An official notice. I opened it calmly. Elaine Whitmore has formally resigned from board leadership effective immediately. Not temporary leave. Not review. Resigned. The word settled heavily but not cruelly. Daniel watched my face. "That's final," he said softly. "Yes?" I replied. There was no celebration in me, no vindication, just consequence. Later that afternoon, Lydia called. "They're telling people it was a misunderstanding," she said carefully, "that the audio lacked context." "It didn't," I answered gently. "No," she admitted. "It didn't." She hesitated. "Mom hasn't been out much." I absorbed that quietly. For years, my mother had curated perception like architecture, layered, polished, controlled. But recordings don't soften with time. They don't reinterpret themselves. They remain. After the call, I stepped outside onto our small patio. Early autumn air carried that crisp edge that feels like transition. I thought about the word legacy. My parents had always treated it like an asset, protected, structured, leveraged. But legacy isn't something you guard with pressure. It's something you model through integrity. The night of my wedding, they arrived dressed in black, as if mourning something. At the time, I thought they were mourning my decision. Now I understood. They were mourning control. And control, once exposed, doesn't resurrect easily. My phone vibrated one last time. A short text from my grandmother. "Peace looks different on you." I smiled. Inside, Daniel called my name, asking if I was coming in. "Yes," I answered, because I was. For years, I believed keeping peace meant absorbing tension, that maturity meant compliance, that loyalty meant silence. It didn't. Peace requires clarity, love requires equality, and legacy isn't built on leverage, it's built on truth. They came dressed for a funeral. They just didn't realize it wasn't my marriage being buried. It was the version of me who confused control for protection, and she's not coming back. Epilogue. Educational reflection. There's something people don't talk about enough. Control often disguises itself as protection. It sounds responsible. It looks strategic. It feels justified. But protection that requires pressure isn't love. It's fear wearing a polished mask. What happened at my wedding wasn't really about money. It wasn't about inheritance structures or phase disbursements. It was about narrative, about who gets to define the story. For years, I let other people shape mine softly, subtly, convincingly. I believed harmony was maturity. I believed silence was strength. It wasn't. Strength is clarity delivered calmly. Maturity is holding a boundary without raising your voice. And love, real love, doesn't test loyalty through leverage. If you ever find yourself shrinking to keep peace, ask yourself, is this peace or is this control? Because the moment you stop negotiating your own dignity, something powerful happens. You don't lose family. You don't lose love. You lose illusion. And illusion was never protection to begin with. If you've ever been told you were too emotional for asking for fairness, if you've ever been pressured to prove loyalty through silence, if you've ever felt like choosing your partner meant betraying your family, you're not alone. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say, "I choose alignment over approval." If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs the reminder that boundaries aren't betrayal. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to choose clarity over comfort? Because sometimes, the legacy we build starts the moment we stop accepting leverage as love.